and mostly these are technical, dealing with ways that the Fund 80 property tax freeze would work to guarantee that school districts can utilize the levy that they've had in a prior year, not just the one previous to the budget being adopted. Making a change to residency so that volunteer firefighters would be exempt from the 15-mile limit, especially in rural areas. That's very important to guarantee that they have adequate access to volunteers who volunteer for the fire department. Also allowing some changes. I know that we heard from a lot of folks about chiropractic students. We heard that through the public hearings who'd taken exams and were not allowed to actually participate in the process because of new changes that were put into place. Some changes will be put in the budget that allow those students to be grandfathered in essence, so they won't have to go through that. We see that there was a lot of discussion, and we are going to be removing today the changes that were made to the Joint Finance Committee made regarding the Veterans Property Tax Credit. We intended to go back and have some caps on that to help control the cost because of concerns about the structural deficit. But after having discussions not just with our friends in the state Senate, but with the governor and our caucus, we realized that we have done such a good job managing the structural deficit from where we wanted it to be that we would choose to, instead of worrying about the structural deficit, we want to reinvest and make sure that that property tax credit continues for our veterans who have served the state so nobly. So that is another change that we are making. There are some other things, the high capacity wells. We are making a change. There was never an intention to make that retroactive. We are going to make it prospective after the budget passes, and the language will also sunrise July 1st of 2014. So what that means is that we have adequate time to work with the state Senate, all the parties who had concerns about that high capacity well language, to try to be able to pass a bill in order to address it directly. If we're not able to, that language will take effect. But I give my word to folks who have concerns about that we are going to do our due diligence to try to pass a proposal that addresses the concerns from all people involved to try to guarantee we have the best possible idea become law by the end of this session. So those are most of the major issues. So the other ones that are on there are much more minor, but truly technical in nature, but definitely going in the direction we said, which is that the budget that was passed by the Finance Committee is the one that we are adopting today with these few small technical changes. And that's lastly because I am proud of what we're doing. Cutting taxes for middle-class families, holding the line on property taxes, freezing tuition, investing in public schools, restoring money to things like child support, road aids for municipalities all across the state, funding for transit. There are a lot of good things where the Democrats hopefully will come to their senses. I know that they always start out saying, how can we figure out a way to get to know? But my hope today is that after listening to the debate, where we're going to be actively involved, that we can convince some of those discerning Democrats who are from seats that are still competitive to be able to come forward and say, I'm willing to work with Republicans to cut taxes for middle-class families, not just when they campaign, but when they actually get a chance to put their money where their mouth is today. So with that, we'd be happy to answer a few questions if you have any. Discussion about that in caucus today. We are looking at other options that will not require us to do it inside the budget. The hope is that we will be able to work with the DNR, and the discussions are going on right now, it's my understanding, to see if there's a way to promulgate an emergency rule so it would have the same force of law as passing a change in statute, but we would not have to do it inside the budget. If for some reason we are not able to negotiate and have a conclusion to that, then we'll look at other options. But we certainly want to look at the emergency rule process first before we have to do anything with the budget.
Steve Noss has already said he's going to vote against this budget and saying that the structural deficit is one of the reasons. He's pointing to the fact that past budgets that have said growth will happen, there won't be a structural deficit like there's projected. That's never been the case. Well, what are you going to try to say to him and maybe some others that have that same concern?
Sure. Well, I don't want to comment on the one Republican who has said he is probably not going to vote for the budget. We could talk about hopefully the other 59 that will. But I am certainly open to the idea of trying to have ways to make the budget better in the future. We have. Our structural deficit is smaller than where the governor was. We have an income tax cut that's twice as big. I believe that if you look at Steve's past record, he's already voted for budgets that had a larger structural deficit than the one that we have right now. So perhaps that's a reason, but it's not one that I would say is as salient considering the fact that we have been able to reduce it quite substantially from where the governor had.
The structural deficit is the second smallest statistics in tracking structural deficits, and with less than even 1% growth, it'll be eliminated. So I agree with the speaker.
On the high capacity wells, are you saying that you want a bill to come forward between now and when that would take effect to kind of look at this in more detail? Or?
Sure. If you remember, the reason that this issue was brought up in the very beginning is because the Supreme Court has asked for legislative direction, and it has not been forthcoming. We see that there are interests all across the state on both sides. People who have concerns about the potential, and it's not documented, but the potential drawdown of lakes as we see farmers who want to have water for their fields. Became even more apparent last year with the drought. So we know that people are worried about it. But many times the failure to act is not the way that we should be going for making Wisconsin a better place to grow your agriculture business or to make sure you have a good quality of life. So this sunrise provision at the end of session is kind of a requirement for us to act, and that's where we really want to go. So I think it's a reasonable compromise. It doesn't do what interests wanted, which was to make it effective right away and give clear direction on day one, but it also gives us almost a full year of legislative calendar to be able to work on finding that common sense middle ground, bringing agriculture together with those who have concerns about the potential for drawing down lakes or wells, and have something passed by the end of the year. So those people who have concerns, I want to work with them to address it. But if it's just a matter of shaking your head and saying, let's accept the status quo, then we're going to go with the language in the budget.
Okay, so if nothing